Good Monday morning and welcome to Opening Bid. I'm Yahoo Finance Executive Editor Brian Sozzi. Lots going on in markets today, so let's not waste any time. Here's what's on my mind right now. Markets shrug off a weekend of surprises for Venezuela. There really hasn't been a large risk-off move in the markets tied to the U.S. removal over the weekend of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro. The largest market move has been in shares of Chevron, which are up sharply higher on this, as it accounts for about 1/3 of the total daily production out of Venezuela. Why the market has shrugged off this news, you're wondering? Well, for one, Venezuela only produces about 900,000 barrels of oil a day, or less than 1% in a glutted market. And two, the situation does almost nothing to rock the bull case in the main market driver. That is, of course, the AI narrative. Ignore chip stocks at your own risk. Taiwan Semiconductor shares are trading at a record high as the street positions for the company winning big this year from the AI boom. The strength of the chip industry is expected to be on display at the Consumer Electronics Show that is underway today. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang will give a speech heavy on robotics, likely this afternoon. AMD CEO Lisa Su is expected to lean into her company's chip-making prowess in a speech of her own at the event. New year, new opportunities. Wall Street analysts are waking from their holiday slumber and coming out with upgrades on key stocks. Goldman Sachs analyst James Yarrow is bullish on crypto player Coinbase, citing a strong brand name and more expansive offering of products. CoreWeave super bear Gil Loria issued what he called a reluctant upgrade on the stock. He thinks a potential $100 billion capital raise for OpenAI could benefit a partner like CoreWeave. And Jefferies analyst Brent Thill is upbeat on IBM due to a better demand outlook for its software. Lots going on here today. Very interesting set of stories. Here in the Opening Bid Roundtable, John Belton, Gabelli Funds Portfolio Manager, Steve Clemens, the National Interest Editor at Large, and Fernando Val, Hedgeye Risk Management Energy Analyst. Good morning to you all. Steve, I want to start with you here. Let's level set on this Venezuela situation. Why do you think the markets are shrugging this off?
Well, right now, Donald Trump's been very lucky. He's sort of had regime change without having to really invest, without much liability for regime change. We're going to have to wait and see how this goes. But right now, markets don't see any real downside. They see firms that were rolled out of Venezuela with Hugo Chavez, who lost huge assets, getting an opportunity to bring those back. And they see in the long run, this is, from an energy and pricing perspective, largely good for the United States and the Western Hemisphere. So far, Donald Trump and the U.S. economy are largely very lucky right now. I have concerns down the road, but that's the way it's playing out.
Fernando, let me get over to you. What are we're seeing a big move in Chevron. Is that justified, and why is that stock moving more so than others?
Well, I think, as you mentioned, it's the exposure to Venezuela. I would say it's not really justified. They're not particularly attractive contracts for Chevron, and there's no growth as it stands today. And if you look at the history of when there is regime change in an oil-producing nation, oil production tends to fall in the immediate term because whoever controls the oil controls the purse, controls the power. And so the question now becomes, who is going to rule Venezuela from here on out? We know President Trump said the U.S. will control it de facto, but we're still to see how that will play out. And if there are different factions within Venezuela, which we have seen over the past few years, it could lead to interruptions in production. So we don't think it's justified. As you mentioned, Venezuela has a fairly small production today of 900,000 barrels a day, and it doesn't have that much pathway to increase that significantly in the short term.
John, how does this situation impact some of the holdings over at Gabelli?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Not much impact, I think, and I think that's why the market is so, quote unquote, shrugging it off. This situation, at least as given what we know today, not a big impact on company fundamentals. Venezuela is not a big part of the global economy. And yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward.
Does this change your thinking, John, on geopolitical surprises? If we were having this conversation a week ago, while Venezuela has been in a period of unrest, I don't think many thought they would have seen the actions that we saw over the weekend. Does this change your thinking around the midterm elections or other things that are on the political docket this year?
Well, I guess at the margin, and again, it's so early, we don't know how this situation is going to unfold, but at the margin, it probably sets a bad precedent in terms of, larger global powers encroaching on smaller neighbors. And the one that really matters to markets is the situation in China with Taiwan. But that is many dominoes away from where we sit today. So maybe at the margin, antennas are raised, but beyond that, hard to take much action.
Steve, this isn't really what Trump supporters signed up for.
No, they did not support and sign up for nation building and what looks to a lot of people kind of liberal internationalism, running another country's government. That is not what they signed up for. And that's why I think Donald Trump is walking a fine line between his own interests of sort of reasserting at what they're now calling the Monroe Doctrine rather than the Monroe Doctrine. But I tell you, there are two big things hanging out there that we're going to have to see how they unfold. The biggest topic this year in trade is going to be the USMCA and whether it comes back in some revived form that is robust enough for automakers, because he mentioned Mexico as a nation that's on his target list. And the other one is Greenland, which, though it's way in the north, is part of the Western Hemisphere. And to take any kinetic action with regard to Greenland could be the dynamic that dissolves NATO, because NATO nations would be obligated to come to Denmark's defense in that case. So when you look at why Venezuela matters, it's not because of lack of exposure on oil or how much they're doing. It's the potential for now what lies down the geopolitical road. And that's why I think that even though the impact of this is very modest right now, the impact down the road for behaviors and muscles that Donald Trump is experimenting with right now could be staggeringly significant.
Fernando, there seems to be this view in the marketplace that oil is going to stay low for an extended period of time. Do you share that sentiment?
We think there's some upward pressure in the very short term, but over the year long, we have said that the demand side is really the problem. We were talked a little bit about on this call about China and the U.S. as well, the U.S. consumer being stretched thin. So both of those aspects are a headwind towards oil prices moving significantly higher. On the other side, you have a lot of stimuli by government, both in Europe, obviously the U.S. and China, which then could pressure that demand up. But to us, we're not talking about going back into the 90s. We're potentially going back into the 70s if there is some pressure from the stimuli that I talked about earlier.
And of course, Fernando, the president now, he was talking about billions of dollars potentially going into oil infrastructure in Venezuela. How should an investor play that if they are so inclined? Is it through drillers? Is it through oil majors? Is it through oil majors, of course, like a Chevron, which is getting a pop today?
Well, I think most folks are looking towards services companies like Halliburton or Schlumberger. Those would be the most direct impacted. And then, as you mentioned, the creditor companies like Exxon or ConocoPhillips that have debits that Venezuela owes them. I think this is going to take a really long time. And a lot of these companies are going to be very slow to deploy capital into a country where there's still no clarity on how you're going to get that capital out. And so I would play this slowly, but I guess services names would probably be the choice here. Secondarily, if you want to play on the U.S. side, the refiners, especially Gulf Coast refiners like Valero, Marathon Petroleum, should benefit because they would have more competition on heavy crude that's been a lack of in the market. So with Venezuela potentially exporting more crude, they would be net beneficiaries.
Well, lastly, Fernando, help the layperson understand this. Exxon stock last year had a pretty good year with oil prices well off their highs. Why is that happening, and could that relative outperformance to the broader market continue?
Yeah, I think it's all about where you are in the cost curve. And Exxon, since 2016, has done a tremendous job of repositioning its portfolio to be at the low end of the cost curve, be that with Guyana, that they have 45% of that block, or with their acquisitions in the Permian, such as Pioneer Natural Resources. So even though oil prices are lower, their margins have actually been fairly strong. They've been free cash flow generating, not enough to cover all of their $14-15 billion in buybacks, annual buybacks, but pretty close. So they have a very low balance, very low debt. And the last part is because of passive investing, the large and mega caps get most of the flows. So someone like Exxon and Chevron is going to benefit in excess of the smaller cap stocks when there's a move up on the sector.
John, if one was bullish on the Mag 7 and AI stocks going into this year, do they stay bullish even if there is rising geopolitical risk?
I would say yes, because I think fundamentals remain very strong. We have pretty good visibility that this should be another big year of AI infrastructure investments, and more importantly, progress in AI adoption and in AI, monetization across multiple business models. So, yeah, I think only two of the Mag 7 outperformed the S&P 500 in 2025. The Mag 7 as a group contributed about 70% of the S&P 500's earnings growth. And I think the vast majority of the S&P 500's revenue growth. So, yeah, I think so long as fundamentals remain healthy, valuations are not a reason to stay away right now.
Have you started to look outside the Mag 7?
Well, I always look outside the Mag 7. Mag 7's about 30% of the S&P 500. I think, so there's still massive amount of names to look at outside of that group. And yeah, I own plenty of names outside the Mag 7, of course.
Steve, let me get the last word over to you. We were talking about that this isn't one Trump supporter signed up for. Does the president now need to shift back to this affordability crisis at the same time this is going on? And how does it even pull that off?
Look, I think the president has a very, very, full plate of challenges in the country. I think the affordability crisis is one. What this president has shown himself somewhat of a genius at is not just the politics of doing what he said, but kind of the politics of distraction. If you've got a lot of discontent at home, you've got prices run at home, but now he's basically can go out and say, hey, we're worried about our energy future. I get what our colleagues said on the table, and I completely agree with them. But in the minds of many people, he's sort of shaping, again, Make America Great Again includes making American energy opportunities and the stability in the Western Hemisphere part of that. And so he connects them in ways that a lot of other people don't. And, he's put some people in the position, we've all started to say, hey, Nicolás Maduro is a really bad guy, but, and so in a sense, he gets an interesting pass about this right now. But I think Donald Trump right now is, as he kind of moves into 2026, is going to have to figure out what is the trade and tariff picture really going to be? What is USMCA really going to be? How is, his appetite for disruption within this hemisphere going to fit with real challenges like with China or Ukraine, Russia, et cetera? So the geopolitical map continues to be complex, but he's showing that his focus is in this hemisphere and his interest in things outside this hemisphere is rather light.
Thanks, guys, for hopping on the roundtable. Appreciate it. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Coming up, CrowdStrike founder and CEO George Kurtz sat down with me in a new episode of my Opening Bid Unfiltered podcast, this being his first comments on his recent decision to spend $300 million to buy a stake in the popular Mercedes F1 team. We'll be right back with that one. CrowdStrike founder and CEO George Kurtz will have a more exhilarating 2026, no doubt about it. The accomplished race car driver just spent $300 million to buy a stake in the popular Mercedes F1 team. In a new episode of my Opening Bid Unfiltered podcast, I talked to Kurtz about his latest investment and the state of cybersecurity in the age of AI.
Well, I think it's a continuation of what we've been doing, which is creating and landing with our platform, Falcon. Helping companies consolidate, drive down cost and complexity, and continuing to focus on our mission of stopping breaches. And if you look at what CrowdStrike does as opposed to a lot of other companies, we're not building a whole bunch of other things outside of security. Our whole mission in life is to build the best technology combined with the best services to stop adversaries and stop the breach. And that's going to be the continuation. If you look at our success, we reported our quarterly numbers a few weeks back. If you look at our growth and re-acceleration in net new ARR is a record 265. If you look at our free cash flow, almost 300 million, 296. It's incredible. If you look at our operating income, all records across the board. And I think what it really tells you is the fact that cybersecurity is needed, CrowdStrike is the right company for it, and the platform approach is winning, combined with with the right licensing mechanism we call Falcon Flex, which has really accelerated the adoption of CrowdStrike, making it easy, friction-free, and the ability to use all of our modules for our customers. And we always report out on the number of modules that are used. We keep increasing the number of module attaches to our, from a customer perspective. And I think that's really a true indication of a platform. So we're going to continue to do more of that. Obviously, AI is going to be important in securing AI. I know we're going to talk a little bit about it, but that's the game plan.
Yeah, on AI, there was a good JP Morgan report I recently read. And for the folks out there that are not super plugged into all things cybersecurity, this note mentioned with AI, it increases the attack surface for potential attacks, I guess, on companies. Like, break that down for us. What is the impact you're seeing because there are AI agents starting to run amok inside companies?
Well, from our perspective, an AI agent is nothing more than a superhuman. It has an identity, non-human identity. In fact, customers are actually giving it employee numbers. If you can believe that.
No, I can't believe that. That's the first time I heard that, actually.
Yes, absolutely true. Because they need to keep track of all of them, so they're giving them employee ID numbers. They have access to data, just like a human does, but lots of it in different places. They have access to compute, right? And they have access to different workflows and systems that are across, in and outside the network. So what a human can do in a day, an AI agent can do in a second, and obviously that introduces risk. So a big part of our focus as a company is protecting all these AI agents. And in the fall, we acquired a company called Pangea, which is focused on protecting AI and AI agents and creating guardrails around what can happen. And there's multiple areas, but just to simplify it, you sort of have like the prompt layer, which is, people putting data in prompts and public LLMs and not really thinking about it. And where does that data go? And what does it mean? And what kind of data goes out, comes back? So putting guardrails around that, and putting guardrails around the fact that if you have your own LLMs, you have people that want to take advantage, and adversaries and other AI, to be honest, that want to extract information out of that LLM that maybe they shouldn't get. So you have something called prompt injection and even indirect prompt injection, and you need to be able to protect against that, which means that if you are offering a service publicly, maybe it's a travel site and, that has your information and it's helping you book a trip. But if you construct the question in a certain way, maybe it's going to give you information about all the other customers, right? So you have to protect against that. So the risk is really been magnified from just like, hey, I can get to somebody's information by exploiting a database vulnerability, to like, I can get to almost anything you want, including secrets, by giving it the right prompt. So that's sort of one. And then two is putting the guardrails around these AI agents. And one of the things that Pangea has really invented now with CrowdStrike is something we call AI-DR, AI detection and response. So you're familiar with EDR, which is endpoint detection and response, but you have to instrument the AI agents. You have to understand what it's doing, what the results are, what it's touching. You have to have visibility, and from a compliance perspective and from a prevention perspective, you have to be able to look at every step of what's happening and be able to record that and then be able to protect against bad things. So if you are a bank and you're releasing an AI agent internally, well, as a human, you have to watch what the human's doing. It's just by regulation, for compliance reasons, you have to do that. The same thing with an agent. You can't just release an agent, which I call, sometimes the AI agents like letting a, drunk intern on your network. Like, who knows what's going to happen, yeah. Right? So you have to be able to protect against it, and you have to have compliance, and that's going to drive a lot of opportunity for CrowdStrike.
You're literally in the trenches with agents and protecting companies. Do you find all this talk about an AI bubble totally absurd? Now, I understand where these critiques are coming from. I actually do not agree with it. I do not think we're in a bubble, but you would know better than me.
You have to define what bubble is, right? is bubble something that's all hyped up and then just has no utility and, people lose a lot of money? I don't think so, because I think AI is fundamentally going to change the way we do everything in this world. And I'm sure most of the listeners here and the viewers will remember the Chat GPT moment, the first time they used it, right? And I remember the first time I used the World Wide Web, dating myself. But that was like, when it first came out, and there weren't even like firewalls. So it's going to change fundamentally business. It's going to change society, and there's risk associated with that. But from a bubble perspective, I think there's going to be a handful of sort of like AI winners, and then you're going to see the large number of AI application and users that are going to win and drive velocity, revenue in their business, and drive down the cost. How it's financed, what that looks like, is there a bubble, and all these sort of circular things that happen with companies, that remains to be seen. But I think the technology is solid. There's real revenue associated with it. But at the end of the day, some of these foundation type models are going to be commoditized. And I think the real winners are going to be the folks who can drive outcomes using software and AI. And that's one of the things that people always talk about. Well, what happens to software? Is AI going to kill software? No, like you're not going to be able to get to an outcome without the software, and AI is just going to help you get there.
Coming up, Julie Hyman will stay on the pulse of the markets on Market Catalyst. We'll be right back.